We can move on to questions to the Prime Minister. Caroline Lucas.
Number one, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others, and in addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you. Our hearts go out to everyone whose lives are being devastated by the current floods. And I'm sure we all welcome the Prime Minister's promise yesterday that he'll do everything he can, both with the relief effort and in building a more resilient country into the future. But would he therefore agree that it would be both complacent and ignorant to flout the warnings of the Met Office and his own advisers, who warn that climate change will lead to even more such events in the future? And can he confirm for the House and for everyone in my Brighton constituency that doing everything he can will include not only reversing cuts to the Environment Agency budget and give a proper funding for flood prevention, but also crucially removing anyone from his cabinet?
Enough. The Prime Minister. The lady shouldn't
reassure the honourable. Let me reassure the honourable lady that I listen very carefully to my experts in the Met Office and in the Environment Agency. Every COBRA meeting starts with a briefing from the Met Office. I think it's clear that we are seeing more extreme weather events, and I suspect we'll go on seeing more extreme weather events, so we need to do everything we can to improve the resilience of our country. Let me repeat again, as I said yesterday, when it comes to this relief effort, money is no object. We'll spend what is necessary to help families, to help people, to help communities get through this very difficult time. I have to say, things are likely to get worse before they get better because of the very high levels of rainfall we've seen, and we see very serious high winds as we speak here in this House today. But whatever can be done to help will be done.
Mark Pritchard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last year, my constituent Georgia Williams was brutally murdered. At the subsequent trial, it was revealed that her attacker had previously attacked another young girl 5 years earlier, and yet unbelievably that attacker got off for the earlier offence with just a police caution, a written warning. Will the Prime Minister join me in calling upon West Mercia Police to publish all relevant material relating to that earlier case in order that any lessons that can be learned will be learned?
No, well, first of all, he's absolutely right to take up his constituent's case in this way, and he has written to me about this specific case. My sympathy goes out to the family and friends of Georgia Williams. As he's asked, I understand the Independent Police Complaints Commission are currently considering its response to a referral from the West Mercia Police into the handling of this case and what needs to be published. On the issue of cautions, let me say that we announced last year that we are banning the use of simple cautions for all of the most serious offences, including manslaughter, rape and robbery, as well as a range of other offences that devastate lives and tear apart communities. Clearly this is a tragic case, and we must get to the bottom of what went wrong.
Ed Miliband.
Mr. Speaker, I join the Prime Minister in expressing all of my sympathies with people who've been affected by the floods, who've been driven out of their homes and who are facing disruption to their lives. And I also join him in paying tribute to all of those helping with relief efforts and to the extraordinary resilience we've seen in the last few weeks of the people of our country. He will know that people in affected communities are relieved that help from the armed forces and emergency services has now arrived, but many feel they were sent in too late. With further flooding expected in the coming hours and days, can the Prime Minister provide an assurance that people will be getting help in time, not after the event?
I can certainly give that assurance, and let me repeat again that it is important, as he said, to praise our emergency services, to praise volunteers, to praise all those working for the Environment Agency who've worked night and day round the clock to help our communities. They really have done amazing work, and we should thank them. In terms of the engagement of the military, I think this is important. It's always been possible for Gold Commanders in these emergency situations to call on military assets. Indeed, a military liaison officer is supposed to sit with those Gold Commanders and liaise with them. What we've done in recent days is say very clearly to all the local authorities concerned, and we've contacted them individually, if you want military assistance, don't think twice about it, think once, then ask, and they'll be there. So we've got now thousands of military at a state of readiness to help out. A huge number have already been deployed, and yes, as we see the levels potentially rising on the Thames again coming into this weekend, we should do everything we can now to get extra help into those communities that could be affected affected and make sure that they're helped. So all the military assistance that's required is there. People only have to ask.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome that promise of proactive help from the Prime Minister. Given the forecasts of extreme weather and river levels rising, one of the key issues that will concern people is not just their homes, but continuing gas and electricity supplies. We have learnt from previous experience in 2007 that protecting electricity substations that can be responsible for power to hundreds of thousands of homes is of particular importance. Can he reassure the House about the steps being taken to protect these vital services?
I can give him that assurance. My right honourable friend, the Minister for Government Policy, carried out a review into the resilience of our infrastructure, and a lot of extra steps were taken following that, and that has made a difference. Also, in the COBRA system, we are monitoring every day those particular bits of infrastructure that could be under threat. In recent days, it's more been about water treatment works than electricity works. I also spoke to the Minister responsible for energy policy at this morning's COBRA to make sure that everything is done to contact the energy companies to stand up the people that will be necessary if there are further supply interruptions over the coming days. I think the experience there, where there were problems in Kent after Christmas, since then, the energy companies and the network companies have done a better job at reconnecting people more quickly.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Prime Minister for that answer. Now, one of the reassurances he provided yesterday, as he said in an earlier answer, was to say money was no object. But this morning, the Transport Secretary said it's not a blank cheque. Can he tell the House exactly what areas of spending yesterday's promise covers?
Well, I was very clear last night, and let me repeat again. As I said last night, money is no object in this relief effort. I want communities who are suffering and people who see water lapping at their doors to know that when it comes to the military, when it comes to sandbags, when it comes to the emergency services, when it comes to restoring broken flood defences, all of those things, money is no object. And to be fair to the Transport Secretary, this is what he said this morning. Money is not the issue while we're in this relief job. That's what he said. He's absolutely right.
Well, of course, he's absolutely right about the relief effort. He also said yesterday, we will spend whatever it takes to recover from this and to make sure we have a resilient country for the future. Let me give him an example in that context. Yesterday, he praised the Environment Agency staff, but they are in the process this year of making 550 people dealing with flooding redundant. These are staff who help put in place and maintain flood defences and help deal with clean-up. If money is no object, as he said, is he committing now to reconsider these redundancies?
Let me tell you exactly what we're doing with the Environment Agency and with the flood defence budget. We are spending £2.4 billion over the 4-year period between 2010 and 2014, and that compares with just £2.2 billion in the previous 4-year period. But what I can say to the House, and I think this is important, that as the waters recede, it will be important for the Environment Agency, for local authorities, all to look again at the flood patterns we've seen, at the models that they have, and work out what fresh flood defences will be necessary. In addition to that, I can tell the House that we will be introducing a grant for all affected homeowners and businesses to build in better flood protection as they repair their properties. That will be up to £5,000 per house and per business. On top of that, we're announcing a £10 million fund to help farmers who've seen their land waterlogged day after day, week after week. And I can also announce today that we'll be deferring the tax payments that businesses have to pay, and all of the businesses that have been affected by floods will get 100% business rate relief.
Mr. Speaker, these steps are welcome and will be welcomed across the House. But I'm afraid he didn't answer the specific question I asked, which is about the 550 people that the Environment Agency are planning to make redundant that work on flood defences. They are people who are currently helping with the clean-up and put in place the flood defences. Similarly, on the issue of spending on flood defence, the Committee on Climate Change says we're spending significantly less on flood defence than we should. So my question is a simple one. Given yesterday's promise to make sure we have a resilient country for the future and spend whatever it takes, is he committing now to reconsider these redundancies and reconsider the amount of money we invest in flood defences?
Well, let me tell him what we're doing with the Environment Agency budget into the future. The Environment Agency budget, in terms of the capital spending, we've set out the figures all the way up to 2020. Now, we've only made capital spending pledges in areas like transport and in terms of flood defences, pledges that no one else is able to match, particularly not if they're committed to a zero-based budget review, but promises we are happy to make so people can see how much money will be spent on flood defences 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. We're only able to make those pledges because we've managed our economy effectively and managed our budgets effectively.
Mr. Speaker, I do say to the Prime Minister, he came along yesterday at his press conference and made what sounded like a very grand promise to spend whatever it takes to recover from this and make sure we have a resilient country for the future. And the simple point I'm making to him is that there are real doubts when it comes to making members of the Environment Agency who deal with flooding redundant, and the lack of investment that the Committee on Climate Change, the expert body that is charged with this to invest in flood defences, says is not happening, and he needs to reconsider those things. Look, I would urge the Prime Minister in the coming days, the government need to speak with one voice on this issue. The response needs to be speedier than it has been in the past, and everyone affected needs to feel they're getting the help they need. If the government does this, they will have our full support.
What I said last night is exactly what I've said today, which is when it comes to this relief effort, money will be no object. I don't want people to worry about penny pinching as they see the vital work that's needed to help them with their houses, to help them deal with the floods. That is what this government is doing. We're deploying the military when we've been asked for the military, deploying extra pumps when we were asked for pumps, raising the compensation to local government to 100% because that is what local communities should have. I'm only sorry that he seeks to divide the House when we should be coming together for the nation.
Mr. Gary Streeter.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank my right honourable friend for his recent visit to Plymouth to discuss our broken rail link? Will he commit our government to finding long-term solutions to rail resilience in the far southwest? But will he join me today in sending a very clear signal to the rest of the country that despite our current problems, Devon and Cornwall is firmly open for business?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. That message needs to go out loud and clear. Businesses, including tourist businesses in Cornwall and Devon, want to see people's custom and want people to know that the peninsula, that Devon and Cornwall are very much open for business. In terms of the specific question he asked, yes, we are finding £31 million to fund 10 rail resilient projects in the southwest to improve resilience for flooding. This will include work at Cowley Bridge Junction, Chipping Sodbury, Hinksey, Whiteball Tunnel, and a number of other places, including Honiton and Crewkerne. Clearly, the most important thing is that Dawlish rail link, which I saw for myself yesterday, the intense damage done to that track and the huge destruction that was wrought by the waves. That will take up to 6 weeks. I know Network Rail are working as hard as they can, and I've said to them, any help that they need, they only need to ask.
Question 3, closed question, Mr. Andy Sawford.
3, Mr. Speaker.
We're the first government to name and shame employers which failed to pay the minimum wage. The name of the first company was published in 2011. We've revised the scheme to make publication easier. I'm not satisfied that this has been going fast enough. And the identity of those companies which have been found to be breaking the law will be made public very, very soon.
Mr. Andy Sawford.
Can I thank the Prime Minister for that response, but say to him, 2 employment agencies in my constituency have recently been found to have not been paid the minimum wage to their workers, and they've had to pay penalties. But the government says they've got to protect the confidentiality of these companies. My constituents think the government's standing up for the wrong people, the rip-off agencies, not the workers. Will he look at it?
Well, as I said, we will be publishing the names of these companies, something that never happened under the party opposite. We are taking the action. And when it comes to penalties for not paying the minimum wage, if we look at the penalties last year, over 700 employers received penalties for failing to comply with minimum wage law, and the value of those penalties was almost 7 times higher than in the final year of the last Labour government. So we hear a lot of talk about enforcing the minimum wage from the party opposite, and you see a lot of action from the government right here.
Mr. David Ruffley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Crime is down 10%, and our excellent Home Secretary's police reforms are allowing good officers to do more with less. But will the Prime Minister immediately implement the Normington reforms of the Police Federation so that police culture can be further improved?
Well, we are working with the Police Federation on this issue. The Police Federation is clearly an organisation in need of reform. To be fair to the new head of the Police Federation, who I've met with, he recognises this and wants to act, and I think we should support him in sorting out this organisation so it better represents its members.
Cathy Jameson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 weeks ago, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury refused to rule out any further tax cuts for millionaires. Last week he said that would be over his dead body. Can the Prime Minister help him out today by ruling out any further tax cuts for the top earners, or should his Chief Secretary be looking to up his life insurance?
Well, I saw him this morning at Cobra and he looked alive and well to me, so I don't think she has any worries on that front. I've said this is not our priority. Our priority is to cut taxes for low and middle earners. That's what we've done. When it comes to April this year, her constituents will be able to earn £10,000 without paying any income tax at all. That's equivalent to a 10% increase in the minimum wage. It means that their income tax bill would have gone down by 2/3 under this government. Those are the sort of tax cuts that we're interested in.
Mr. David Heath.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister for their personal engagement with our issues on the Somerset levels. But can I ask the Prime Minister a question which I don't think the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government quite grasped on Monday, which is this. When the emergency, the crisis phase of this problem is over, we have to have sustainable plans to protect people on the Somerset levels. That will require a revenue stream which will come through local government, and that means changes to the way that that is administered. When we have those detailed plans, will the Prime Minister meet with me and others from Somerset to ensure that we have a sustainable future?
I'm very happy to meet with him and other MPs from Somerset, and I've been to visit twice myself to see for myself. But the problem at the moment, as we know, is simply the pumping capacity, which is taking now 3 million tonnes, soon 5 million tonnes of water off the Somerset levels. But because there is 65 million tonnes or more of water on the levels, it's going to take time. What we need to do once that water level starts to come down is get the dredging going and then work out the long-term programme for making sure that this man-made environment is properly looked after by man, so it is sustainable for the future. I'm very happy to meet with him and discuss that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The conditions outside are dreadful. The voluntary sector, emergency services and individuals have been amazing, but people and businesses are angry. In the southwest, my region, they're angry because of the excessive costs they see of High Speed 2 when we have the whole of the West Country without a resilient rail network. And the money re-announced today is welcome, but not enough. Will he commit in the medium term to ensuring to support growth and growth and recovery in the region, that Plymouth is put onto the strategic road and transport network? It's not there at the moment, and it should be.
I make three very quick points to the Honourable Lady, and I totally understand her concern and the concern of her constituents. First, I don't want anyone to be under the misapprehension that HS2 is going to be built at the expense of the West Country. It isn't. In the next Parliament, we will spend 3 times more on other road and rail schemes as we'll spend on HS2, and some of those schemes will directly benefit people in the West Country. Second point, while we are working as fast as we can to restore the Dawlish link, we do need to look at longer-term alternatives, and I've discussed this with Network Rail and First Great Western to see what more can be done. Third point, in the meantime, while Dawlish is as it is, we need to go on boosting the air services to the peninsula, which is why I met with Flybe in Newquay, and they've doubled the number of flights, and we've taken £5 off the cost of each of those flights. But we also need to make sure the replacement bus services are as good as they can be. If we do all of those things, that will lessen the impact of this tragedy for the West Country.
Michael.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. With some flooding in Frampton for residents and for businesses in Woodchester, and actually more risks in my constituency associated with the risk warnings for the Severn Estuary, does the Prime Minister agree with me that the action taken so far by various agencies and councils has been helpful, and that can he reassure my constituents that the government will continue to invest in flood defences?
I can certainly give him that assurance. He's right to mention the difficulties on the River Severn, because the River Severn, the River Tame and the River Wye are all expected to respond to recent rainfall, and levels are likely to go up. In terms of the Thames, I should tell the House that a second peak in Thames levels is expected on Sunday and Monday, and that could potentially put 800 properties at risk. But we will go on doing whatever we can to help people, getting people to communities before they're flooded. But it is worth making the point, and this is a point to be fair to the last government as well as this one. If you take the 2007 floods, when 55,000 homes were flooded, since that time, if you look at all the schemes that have been built, they are actually protecting now well over 1 million properties that would have been flooded this time round, were it not for the important work that's been done.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week, Shelter found that house prices have been rising faster than wages in most parts of the country. Does the Prime Minister not agree that the lack of affordable housing is making the cost of living crisis worse for millions of people across our country? And will he confirm that this government has presided over the fewest number of new homes built since the 1920s?
So, housing starts are up from the dreadful situation we were left from the last government, and we are now investing huge amounts into affordable housing. But I make no apology for the fact that it is right to deal with the demand side on housing as well as the supply side. Things like Help to Buy are actually helping to get builders building, because builders won't build unless they believe that buyers are able to buy. So we're fixing this problem, and house building is rising.
Alok Sharma.
Are suffering from flooding. And I just want to put on record my thanks to the council officers from West Berkshire Council, from Readingborough Council, and the volunteer flood wardens in places like Turley, and the soldiers of Severn Rifles for the work that they're doing to help my constituents. I welcome the schemes that the Prime Minister has talked about in helping individuals and businesses. Will he ensure that the details of these schemes are made available to everyone who's affected so they can actually make use of them?
No, I think my honourable friend makes an important point, and I know that he's working very hard to bring people together in his own constituency to make sure that everything that can be done in Reading is done, and obviously they will be concerned about the rise in the Thames. We'll publish details of all of these announcements that I've made, and we'll add into that also the fact that the major banks are coming forward with over £750 million of financial support, which will mean repayment holidays, reduced or waived fees, loan extensions and increased flexibility of terms, and specialist support teams deployed on the ground for businesses and for farmers who desperately need help. It is a time for our insurance companies and our banks to demonstrate real social responsibility. I believe they're beginning to do that, and we should encourage them to do so.
Does the Prime Minister agree with me that after months of letting energy companies get away with increasing their profits on the back of hard-working people across this country, that the Energy Secretary's letter to the regulator this week was simply too little, too late?
No, I think he was right to write to the Ofgem, because, of course, Ofgem are part of this competitive review which we have announced. But it's on this side of the House that we've delivered the £50 off bills by rolling back the cost of the green levies. That's the right approach, rather than promising a freeze that only means prices will go up.
Lauren Ebert.
Prime Minister agree with me that the success of coalition policies in helping to create more jobs than forecast is very encouraging. But would he also agree that in order to get sustained growth, we need businesses to invest more? So will he do all he can to support my right honourable friend, the Chief Secretary, in encouraging more business investment?
In this next stage of the recovery, it is an increase in business investment that we need to see. I think there are positive signs from the last GDP numbers. She talks about there being more jobs than forecast. It is worth remembering that the Leader of the Opposition told the CBI in October 2010 they have a programme that will lead to the disappearance of 1 million jobs. Now, since he made that statement, we've seen 1.6 million new private sector jobs and 1.3 million more people in work. More forecasts like that, please.
Ali.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With almost 1 million young people unemployed and the work programme, in the Chancellor's own words, underperforming, will the Prime Minister think again and introduce Labour's Youth Jobs Guarantee?
The work programme has done an excellent job at getting people into work. And if you look at the job creation record under this government, as I've just said, 1.3 million more people in work, a reduction in youth unemployment, a reduction in long-term unemployment, more people in our workforce than ever before. There's always more to do to get young people into work. I think the best schemes that we've had are schemes like the Work Experience Scheme that seem to be providing real hope and jobs for our young people.
Oliver Colville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank my right honourable friend for coming to Plymouth on Monday to see for himself how hard First Great Western is actually working trying to get trains back on track. But one of the things that would be incredibly helpful would be make sure that we could actually have a timetable for these actions so that we can deliver a resilient railway line as well. Thank you.
I completely understand his concern. Obviously, the gap in the rail provision created by the Dawlish disaster, it is going to take time to deal with. And above and beyond that, I know what he wants and what people in Plymouth want is a timetable of getting to a 3-hour service to Plymouth and see more trains arriving early in the morning. As I've said, we've got a longer-term programme of looking at rail alternatives at the same time as restoring the Dawlish line.
Timms.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But with economic growth delayed for 3 years after the election, we've been left with more young people. We've been left with more young people out of work long term than at any time for 20 years. Surely we must do more so we don't waste the potential of a generation.
I can only think the Honourable Gentleman is suffering from a form of memory loss. He was a Treasury Minister when we lost 7% of our GDP, when youth unemployment doubled, when people were being thrown out of work. What's happened under this government? The economy is growing, 1.3 million more people in work, young people are getting back to work, while countries elsewhere are struggling, our economy is growing, and that is partly because we took tough and difficult decisions to get the budget deficit, which he and his henchmen left us, under control.
Mr. Adrian Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, some tourist concerns in my constituency have reported lost bookings, partly as a result of over-sensationalising the crisis that we have. When the crisis is over, will the Prime Minister talk to the Treasury about allocating a sum of money to market the far southwest to potential visitors and businesses to get the message across we really are open for business?
This was a point made to me by a number of businesses that I visited in Cornwall and Devon over the last couple of days, all wanting to see much more advertising and publicity about how Devon and Cornwall is open for business. So I will take every opportunity I have to help with that issue. I think when the Dawlish line is restored, that will be a big moment to really market the benefits of Devon and Cornwall, where I have been known to holiday myself.
Mr. Richard Burden.
Could I invite the Prime Minister to recall the day that he asked the country to imagine a Tory government that would be the most family-friendly in Europe? And when he reflects on that, day, will he consider the more recent report from the Centre for Economic and Business Research, which shows that the cost of raising a child and getting that child through university has actually risen by £5,000 in 1 year? Does he think that for most families, money is no object?
Many families have faced a very tough time in this country, not least because of the appalling recession that we had under the party opposite. But what this government has introduced is, yes, we have taken steps to encourage flexible working. We are introducing tax-free childcare. We've supported more childcare for more families than the last government did, helping 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. We have the new rules on shared parental leave, and above all, example, there are many families that now have someone in work because the economy is moving, businesses are employing people, and those 1.3 million extra jobs is 1.3 million extra families with the security and peace of mind of a regular paycheck coming in. And that's the best way to help our families.
Mr. Brand-Binley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Through you, can I remind the Prime Minister that in 1998 Northampton suffered serious floods, killing sadly 2 people and impacting upon 2,000 houses. Since that time, I've noticed that we haven't over-bothered not to build upon floodplains. Will the Prime Minister, after this episode has been dealt with and his time is perhaps more easily readily available, ensure that we don't build on floodplains so that people shouldn't be inconvenienced in this way?
I look very carefully at what my honourable friend says. I think the figures suggest that in terms of applications for properties being built on floodplains, the official advice, and that includes the advice from the Environment Agency, is followed in 99% of occasions. It is worth remembering, of course, that areas like London are part of a floodplain, so I don't think it's possible simply to say that no house can ever be built on a floodplain, but what we need to do is look at the rules, listen to the experts, and make sure we only build where we can protect.
Graham Morris.
Thanks to Labour in the Scottish Parliament, Scots may soon be free of the iniquitous bedroom tax. So, will he today give an assurance to the House and to the Scottish people that he will work with the Scottish Government to help bring this about? Or better still, scrap this hated tax for everyone in Britain? Because if he won't, we will.
Well, obviously, under our devolved system, different parts of the United Kingdom can make different decisions to spend money as they choose. From my view, that it's not fair to say to someone in private rented accommodation that you don't get money for extra bedrooms when you say to someone in social accommodation that you do. I think it's a basic issue of fairness, and that is why it has overwhelming public support.
Mr. David Amis.
I undertook a 1.5-hour walk organised by Guide Dogs for the Blind to experience at first hand the real difficulties that blind and partially sighted people experience as pedestrians. It was very tricky. So will my right honourable friend look very carefully at the recommendations of that organisation for shared street surfaces?
No, I will look carefully at what my honourable friend says. I think everyone has noticed how a huge amount of improvements have been made to the way that streets and traffic lights and pavements and everything are arranged for particularly this purpose, but I'm very happy to look at what he says and to see what more needs to be done.
Mr. Greg McClymont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the Prime Minister believes that flood defence is so important, why, when he came to office, did he cut the budget?
As I've explained, we'll be spending £2.4 billion in this 4-year period. That compares with £2.2 billion under Labour. I think you'll find 2.4 is more than 2.2. And also, by setting out the spending figures all the way up to 2020, he has to ask the Shadow Chancellor, who's back in the gesticulation game, if he's going to have a zero-based budget review, doesn't he have to admit to his colleagues that he cannot guarantee to match any of the spending that we've announced? Silence!
Mr. John Barron.
The Prime Minister is aware of a cross-party group of some 80 MPs campaigning for recognition of our nuclear test veterans. Given that the UK compares poorly as to how other countries treat their veterans, and the very high incidence of ill health suffered by their descendants, would the Prime Minister meet with us, given that we've hit a brick wall with the MOD, and given this government's good track record at recognising past wrongs?
Well, I know my honourable friend has consistently campaigned on this issue, and I have discussed it with him before, and I wrote to him a month ago setting out the government's view about this. This and previous governments' frequently stated position is there's no published peer-reviewed evidence of excess illness or mortality, but I think it is right to go on looking at this issue, as I know he will, and we'll continue to discuss it with him.
Order.